Hello everybody and welcome to the Tableau JavaScript API tutorial. The API that was released in Tableau 8.0 allows you to programmatically create interactivity between a web page and a Tableau visualization. This will be a great tool for doing things like building your own custom portals, putting them in news articles or blogs for storytelling type of functionality. But really the possibilities are endless what people are going to be doing with this API. What I've done here is I've created a portal that houses a visualization, and outside of that visualization I've got some buttons that control the view, such as switching which view we're looking at, filtering. It's got a lot more functionality such as event listeners, advanced filtering, some utility functions, and so on. And we'll be covering all of these types of features inside of this tutorial series. Now, a few things I should note before we get started. The first is that I'm using Google Chrome here. I prefer to do my development in Google Chrome, but you could easily use Firefox or Internet Explorer 8 or above. Those are all compatible with the JavaScript API. Other thing to note here is that I'm going to be using Notepad++. This is a free text editor that you can download. Really nice tool for programming in, and it's definitely a step up from Windows, the built-in text editor. But you can use whatever text editor you prefer to use for this tutorial series. Finally, it will be necessary to download from this web page that you are watching this video. It will be a .zip file, and inside of it will be a few files inside of there. There will be a Tableau packaged workbook named Presence. You shouldn't need to do anything with this unless you would like to do all of your follow along with this tutorial on your own server as opposed to the Tableau public, in which case you'll need to take that Presence Tableau packaged workbook and save it, publish it up to your server, and then continue from there. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to open this HTML file, lesson1start.html, inside of Notepad++. Few things, you'll notice a variety of things going on here. Basically, this is just a skeleton HTML file where you can do all of the work. We're handling the layout and the style for you already, so you don't have to worry about any of that stuff. Just the coding that's required for the JavaScript API will happen, and that'll almost all happen inside of this section here, in between those two comments there. Now to get started, I'm going to grab this URL here, and that's where my visualization that I would like to embed inside of this HTML page lives. Now to start with, I should note one thing before we get started. That is that you'll notice it says publicbeta.tablewsoftware.com, and after release, this visualization will live at public.tablewsoftware.com. So that's one thing to keep in mind as we go through this tutorial series, is that you'll be using the public.tablewsoftware.com URL, and all the rest after that will be the same. So let's grab that URL and open it up in Chrome. And this is what it looks like. Just a typical view inside of Tableau server. In this case, this is Tableau public. What I'm going to start with is the old way to embed, not using the 8.0 API. You just come to Share, grab the embed code, Control-C copy, and feel free, if you are following along, to not follow along during this part. Again, this is the old way to do it. And we'll find a place inside our HTML that we'd like to put it, and just Control-V paste. I'm going to save this, and I'm going to come to Run, launch in Chrome, and we'll see what we're looking at. And there you have it. It's a visualization inside of a web page. Now, if you're just going to be doing static embedding, that is, if you would like to just take a visualization that has been published to server and put that inside of your web page without any interactivity between the web page and the visualization, then this is a fine way to do it, and in fact it's the easiest way to do it. But that's using the old way of embedding. Notice that if we come back to Notepad++, the JavaScript file that we're using is called viz_v1.js. That's the old JavaScript file that allowed embedding, and we'll still be using that if you're just going to be doing that static embedding. But if you'd like to do more advanced JavaScript API work, that is, you would like to create some interactivity between your web page and your visualization, then you're going to need to use the different .js. So I'm going to just delete the JavaScript block that we pasted in there. And I'm going to, you'll notice here in the header here, we have a line called script type, and it points to a file called Tableau_v8.debug.js. Let's go ahead and uncomment that. Now in production, you might want to use Tableau_v8.js file that looks like this. The debug version is going to be a bigger file size, but will be nicer for doing various types of debugging. Once again, notice that I'm using publicbeta.tablowsoftware.com. If you're going to be pointing this at the release version of public, it will be public.tablowsoftware.com. Or if you actually are pointing at your own installation of Tableau server, then you'll have your own URL here. And now we're ready to start using JavaScript to embed our visualization. Notice I have these script tags here, and that's where we're going to put our JavaScript. To embed a visualization inside of our web page using the API, we're going to need to create a new viz object. I'm going to call that object viz, and I'm going to do it with new JavaScript keyword Tableau software.viz. That's case sensitive, so make sure you get the S and the V capitalized. Inside of that constructor, we need 3 arguments. The first is called visDiv. Well, that's what we're going to call it for now. And visDiv is going to be the element on the HTML page where we would like to put this. Second argument we'll call visURL. That's where does the viz live on the web? What's its URL? And finally, options is the options object, which we'll use to control how our viz will be embedded. Now we've called this constructor with those 3 variables, visDiv, visURL, and options. We haven't yet created those. So let's go ahead and do that now. The first one is visDiv. Like I said, this is the location of where we're going to put our viz inside of this HTML. Now I've created this empty div with the ID of viz, and that's where I would like to store my visualization. But we need to go ahead and grab that div and have a pointer to it essentially inside of our JavaScript with the JavaScript variable. And the way you do that is you create a new variable, visDiv, and use this built-in JavaScript function called document.getElement by ID, and you pass in the name and a string of the div where you would like to grab. In this case, it's called viz, semicolon, and we're good on visDiv. The next variable is called visURL. And what this is just a string of the URL that we'd like to embed. The last thing is a JavaScript object called options. JavaScript objects are created with open bracket, close bracket. And for now, we're going to leave it empty. We'll see later how we can put things inside of this options object and how that will affect our embedding, how our embedding is working on our web page. So we'll go ahead and we'll save this HTML. We'll run it in Chrome. And now we have our visualization, our tree map, embedded inside of our HTML page. Okay, now let's go back to our script here, our HTML inside of those script tags, and explore some of the options you can put inside of this options object. Now this options object is just a JavaScript object, which means the notation for including some options inside of here will look something like, if we wanted one called width, be width, colon, and then the value of it. A width, in this case, takes in a string, so we'll give it a string, 600 pics, and we'll do something similar for height. Make sure it's a string once again, and we don't need that comma because it's the last option we're going to be creating for now. We'll hit save, and we'll run that in Chrome. And there we have the visualization has been resized as per our specifications in that options object. Let's explore a couple more options. First one would be hiding the toolbar. By default, this is false, but it takes a Boolean that you can tell it to be true, and it will hide the toolbar. We'll run that in Chrome once again. And now let's explore what the difference between hiding it and not hiding it is. Notice when we don't hide it, our previous version, we have the export and the revert all buttons there. And when we do hide it, we lose those. Now this is actually just the behavior when you're using Tableau Public, because Tableau Public doesn't allow you to hide the toolbar here. That's just because we want you to be able to tweet. We want to force you to be able to tweet in Facebook and see the Tableau logo, etc. But if you are a Tableau server customer and you have your own private installation of Tableau server and you use that hide toolbar option, then that whole toolbar from share to download, that'll go away when you use hide toolbar. Let's explore one last option, and I encourage you to read the documentation. There's a couple other options in here as well. And later we'll also explore one for asynchronous programming. But for now, let's just do one more called hide tabs. Once again, add the comma there to hide toolbar at the end of hide toolbar, and we'll do hide tabs equals true. Save it and run it one last time. Notice at the top of our page here, our tabs have gone away. Previously, we had these tabs which allowed us to switch between our visualizations, but now we don't. Now you may be asking yourself, what would be the point of hiding the tabs? Now I can't switch between my visualizations. Well, that's a good point, and that's the great thing about the 8.0 JavaScript API is that it allows you to control that switching of the visualizations using the API, which means you can create your own custom buttons for inside of your web page. And that's actually what the subject of the next lesson after this one is. But there's one more thing I want to do to prepare us for that lesson and all other lessons afterwards. And I want to actually take all of my JavaScript that I've created and make sure that it's actually in a JavaScript file instead of inside of my HTML script tags. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to hit Control-N, create a new file inside of Notepad, and I'll just save it as, I'll call it tutorial.js, but you can call it whatever you want. Make sure you don't save it as a TXT. And we'll hit save. I'm going to take all of that code that we created previously, and I'm going to cut it, paste it inside of my view here, and then I'm going to just reformat a little bit so that the indentation is correct. Now there's one last thing I need to do. I need to make sure that this JavaScript doesn't happen until all of the HTML has loaded. There's a built-in functionality for handling it that way into JavaScript, and it's just called window.onload equals function, open parentheses, close parentheses, we'll open the bracket, and we'll close the bracket at the very end. Once again, I'm just going to re-indent here so that it is formatted correctly. I'll save. And there's one last thing. Now, I've created that tutorial.js. We put it in the same folder as this HTML file. We just need to make sure that this HTML file points at that tutorial.js. The easiest way is that script is going to look very similar, or that script tag is going to look very similar to the script tag we use for including the Tableau.js, but the source URL is just going to be tutorial.js. We'll hit save, and then we'll go ahead and run this. And there we have it, the exact same view as we had before, but now we have our files nicely partitioned. So we have our HTML and we have our JavaScript separately. That'll prepare us nicely for the rest of the tutorials. So that concludes this tutorial lesson. What we've done here is we've explored a little bit of an introduction to the JavaScript API, and we've learned how you embed using that 8.0 JavaScript API into a web page, and you have a few options. It sets us up so that on the rest of our tutorials, we can start to manipulate the view and make that interaction that the API is so great at doing. I hope to see you at our next video, and I hope you've enjoyed this so far. Bye.